Nobody realizes, but everyone would. How no one realizes, you guys are replacing what James Madison had declassified for us with the founders behind him and his plan. Nobody had free speech. Everyone had to pretend they had free speech to an extent, otherwise be discerned. The breaching method was trying to check who was behind that to get everyone at the same time put fake excuses for why they were doing it, but to become a country. But no, they had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. Self-valued roles with their own land, tactically to nature, and they're doing that on the Native Americans, already had been sustained because it had been sustained upon them too, since before religious messengers. Names A through Z that could only, as countries that could only be operated by locations, areas, and states. A breaching method forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded locations, areas, and states now everywhere the human species has a body standing to blame other things, others, or selves for nature's demonstrations of itself. Nature itself demonstrates to us. One of the things that all those crazy laws leveraged against everyone was, everyone to hurt each other and themselves syntactically. And that was measured and maintained by internationally monitored conversations. Overt criminal enterprises, sense and sensibilities, private ones, their sense and sensibilities, use Jane Austen's phrase. So, in other words, George Washington told us to be honest about his extortion. It would have brought up James Madison's plan. He was using James Madison's plan and the founders behind him. And they were just counter extorting everyone to an extent. Made them have no main. Once they broke those rules of the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists at the time, internationally, the companies with those international companies with those countries, and then America's founders were born. Everyone was already roles with all that crazy stuff. We're supposed to ask ourselves, and we're supposed to get at last one teacher capable of speaking properly for why and how. There is a witch trials place next to Webb House. And all the founding locations, you guys still have other communicated about it that our founders communicated for us to understand about them. And our founders didn't even have free speech. James Madison is the only founder we know the name of, by the way. And then he was a president / chief also. He still did not have free speech. They had this declassified for themselves. He had this declassified for himself, for us, and for all of humanity. We're supposed to, getting the Constitution unabridged is a policy. People speak about policies, but not with that in mind. And then they want to defend that and self-value their rules with the campuses. The campuses have rules with organized crime acts and methods, plural, that are bound by the breaching method. That's one of the things that all those crazy laws were at the same time. Value as a human fact, human nature, breaching method. Nature shows us this. And our founders communicated this. But you guys have replaced, you have self-valued roles, reinterpreting the words of everyone, leaving out the breaching methods rules with that, measuring how everyone was measured and maintained, replacing what our founders communicated about it. Again, and the only one we know the name of, we know there was more than him behind it. It wasn't George Washington alone who had the means to force people to unity that way. There are proofs too, Native Americans. We don't know their specific names. It's all nature shows us too. All Native Americans are our founders. That's also what president / chief shows us. They simply just, all human differences are used through and as systems consciously by a breaching method that has A through Z not conscious of it. They're consciously used by it having been self-valued roles within as systems tactically ulterior from the one that is the human species body, an individual different species body than the rest of the species body, made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies and them too. So we could discern the individual identity of value progression, generating all differences, and how we could ignore it. But it demonstrates with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. This breaching method forced, tricked, tortured, extorted, and in fact, human nature enslaved, therefore physically, names A through Z, to to observe all roles and to be roles or to be roles, forcing those demonstrations by nature blamed on other things, others, ourselves. Now, that's the real causes of the worst negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in the cities. I know this because it was recorded before our founders were born. Northern colonies and southern colonies, more than 13, and rolls with it. There was a torture, extortion, and slavery method entrenched, sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly everywhere. And rolls with that. As again, syntactic systems, therefore physically, tactical, ulterior from nature. James Madison is our founder. George Washington, they use his words, pretending like he had free speech. We're supposed to understand clearer than day how everyone was measured and monitored, and everyone through themselves, and not even knowing, because how they knew that, they didn't see the rest of it involved with it, and they would use all truths about that in their syntax, appreciation of it, descriptions of it, for lies. Use it for the breaching method. Everything a breaching method does, it has to do it through other people, so it can keep itself increasingly screened. And its function, its method, keeping everyone blaming other things, others, ourselves, with nature to actually do. The suburbs are tactically to nature to cause negative value nature progressions, acts. Nature supports people to self-value roles. The only means to overcome the negative that and try to, to an extent, is to self-value roles with that. The only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures more and more is if the self-value roles with criminal insidiousness natures a means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. In other words, the difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positive, criminal insidiousness natures of peace, criminal insidiousness natures of uses of truths. No, in other words, facts, fact-cheating nature. You guys have sense and sensibilities, want, need, and force a nature of debate, or in other words, that can't entertain that and afford to have told properly American history. The only reason there was the Constitutional Convention, Declaration of Independence, and the Civil War is because of James Madison's plan. Please, WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, and their sources, and the intelligence next to them, and the same with Fox Connecticut News, and the same with WTNH. But WFSB went all the way out and just attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. Many involved with and as former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his family member, and their co-defendants, and their neighbors. They have collusions on and off campuses with sexual and medical offenders of kids, proven years apart. They had time collusions forcing that. They have all this fake and change, they fake and change phone transcripts when you catch them at the campuses. And at the Wethersfield police station, they attach little kids to fake conversations and ties to police. And then as adults, too. Then they had to hide live progressions, one of the things they pretended with the news is involved with all kinds of organized crimes. And the interbranch refused to identify themselves legitimately. They had their kids involved with this because they have readings of statutes and precedents, like regarding statutes of limitation, where they're involved with ongoing or criminally foreign influence uses of them. Of their positions, their names, their thought, their reason. They're only capable of it. We're going to have to address, sense and sensibilities, use Janice's phrase. And we're going to have to address how and why what James Madison had declassified for us, why and how it's replaced, why and how all this time people could get away with pretending to believe and actually believing that in other words, but they had free speech. We know they didn't have free speech. You guys are pretending things are debatable. They're not. You're pretending things are not debatable. They are. Because you guys have self-valued roles at the campuses. The campuses A through Z, sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly. They have self-valued roles replacing what James Madison communicated, even though it's known. But that's because that's what they told me. That's my job. How many people, that's whether this breaching method we're supposed to address, too, how the private criminal enterprises our time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists. Get me off the fake conversations with Channel 3 News about the World Trade Center attack. They have roles with names at the World Trade Center next to it and the court next to it, involved with all sides of cases in courts at the same time with news, putting in the same sequence shifts. And they did it in the world right before the World Trade Center attack context, in that context and since. And with Connecticut courts, same ones involved with that, interstates and internationally. There are international countries, not just companies, countries that had their roles here and there, shared through and as systems tactical area from how we are human species body of individual bodies. And nature showing us things with group differences. But we have to appreciate it with syntax. Where we have our syntax forced to entertain what's not its system. So people want to go, oh, well, you didn't know that about American history. Meanwhile, they don't know the first principle thing. James Madison's plan. No one had free speech. Everyone was counter-extorted. You guys were supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. Repent. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, who disbelieves. Don't be cowards. Keep it focused on the predicate acts about the World Trade Center. I told you. I was in the court next to it. You guys are with the news, planting evidences with the countries. Weathersfield police have roles with the Saudi attackers, falsified transcripts with them before and after the World Trade Center attack. They're the same ones involved with child abusers, leaders, and kids, first forced years apart, and families involved with it. Get me off the big conversations. Get those interbranch on paper now. And Judge Napolitano, because I tried to contact him on Facebook before he was not with Fox News. Fox News won't help me because they have a bunch of people with FBI Director Robert Lusk and his co-defendants and their family members involved intercities and intra-cities with predicate acts next to Fox Connecticut News. The same ones involved with this WFSB with fake conversations with me. Please, Fox Connecticut News, don't be collusions with them with that. It's even worse. In other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence. And don't hide this. You guys have forensics names too, involved with a Whiting Forensics is increasingly involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids years apart. A Joshua Julian also has collusions with that, with Facebook. Facebook pages of New Britain Superior Court and Weathersfield Police have a whole bunch of people tied to a Joshua Julian and a Joshua Schumack. I never see either of them on my street, but they have roles with intelligence the families near me. Further then and now involved with the child abusers, identity thefts, frauds with the news, and the interbranch at the same time. Their roles with organized crimes with the criminally foreign influence uses of the corrections office and judicial branch offices and campuses of all ages and natures. Their roles with fire campuses and medical campuses too, with the houses and businesses next to them, Hartford Hospital, increasingly involved with predicate acts in my street, planting evidences. Fear God, the hiding plot. Who disbelieves? Get me the fucking answer.